And we're live. Welcome to the Best in Slot Podcast, a Warcraft podcast by the community for the community. I'm your main host, Sparty. I'm here with my co-host, Midgettes. Midgettes, how are you this fine Sunday evening?
I'm doing well, Sparty. How are you?
Good. Just came back from Sunday family dinner, so podcast is running a little bit late. And of course, with kids, everything is on their schedule and not so much on yours. But it was good. Good, lots of food, lots of family. Kid was
Well, it sounds like the U.S. holiday weekend for Thanksgiving, because I'm pretty sure that's what we were all doing for us in the States.
yeah. No, did you have a good Thanksgiving as well?
I did. I had a very nice time with my son and his new wife and their family.
Oh, fantastic. That's good. It's all about family, and it's all about, our families behind the scenes and behind the screens, and, the families that we have in game and everything else. So, we've always been thankful. We're thankful for this podcast, and we're thankful for, the awesome community that we have. So hopefully everyone has had a, belated happy Thanksgiving. But today we'll be talking about, so this is episode 49. We'll be talking about really mistakes. Mistakes were made. Really, we all make them, and in real life, and in raid, and in guild. And it's something that's we wanted to do, a couple weeks ago. But this is a good time to do it as well, because it's always a good topic. Getting that feedback, making those mistakes. People are always afraid to make them, but really the key to these mistakes is learning from them. But we'll talk about that after. So the first part, are you ready for this joke? This is not so much
I'm as ready as I'll ever be.
Okay, I will warn you, this is not a dad joke. It's an actual joke.
Okay.
Okay, so guy goes to a doctor and goes to the doctor and says, "Hey, I've got a problem. It's serious." Doctor replies, "Well, what's your problem?" Guy replies, "I've got 5 penises." Doctor says, "That's a problem. How do your pants fit?" And the guy replies, "Like a glove."
Oh my goodness.
I said that one in Guild. That's actually a Moonfax joke, which is now my joke. Said in Guild the other day during raid, and people found it hilarious. And I shared it at the dinner table in front of a bunch of doctors, and they all laughed. So, good times. They like medical jokes.
Absolutely.
So, what is new in the community? So, we'll start off with that. From a rating perspective, there's been some old year changes. We saw some of these nerfs coming, a while ago, and Gahoon's been nerfed. The number of bursting boils has been nerfed down to 1. The gibbering horror's health has been reduced by 10%. I'm not sure how that's going to scale. Maybe it's 10% multiplicative, because with each bursting boil, his health increases. So we'll see how that is. Fetid was nerfed again. The first time it was a fix. This time it was, I think, a proper nerf. It's 20% reduced damage, and the stomps do less damage. The paroxysm does less damage, so you can definitely 3-heal these encounters now. And they've also decreased the health by 10%, which is great. And of course, Mithrax, this was a big one. Sort of one that came a little bit earlier, where melee can no longer target by orbs, because you'd go to Mithrax and you'd have I'm in my heroic raid with 30 people, and it sucks because I can only bring 4 melee, and now you can bring 10 melee, and Holy Paladins and of course Mischievers don't get targeted by abilities. So all for the healers and range DPS now to get targeted. So you should never ever get into a situation where people are getting double orbed. So good little changes to Uldir.
Yeah, and I know that our melee were commenting on how much easier it was, because they had to do quite a bit of learning on the orb dodging, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's some great weak ores there. That little green one and red one that makes a circle. When the orb is going to cast, and are you far enough away from other people? That's always been a really good one. But now, all the melee can stack in each other. Bring 10 melee, it's totally fine. You're doing Mythic Mithrax, and you kill the ad, and everyone's cleaving it, and it's everyone's super happy. So good change. Substantial nerf to the encounter, but that's good. I don't know. Part of me wishes that this was the original iteration of the boss, and our melee would, see a little bit more raid time, and we wouldn't have to, bring all of our ranged, because that was all of our ranged to that stupid encounter.
Well, and I think that's why they had to make the decision, is because so many people were having to set melee, or it'd be just the more melee you had, the more challenges you had, and that was the reality. And even on heroic, it was really challenging, especially in a full raid.
Yeah, and this is something that comes up pretty much every raid tier, though, right? It's too many melee. Okay, we better sit some melee. And Fetid was the same thing, right? Because of how the circles worked and the paroxysms and how much damage you were taking and the debuff spread, and you couldn't heal it. Well, you want to reduce the amount of melee because I mean there's just not room around the little pustule things. So it's
Well, it could be said that they might have made a mistake.
how appropriate. Yes, on our podcast of mistake, you're right. They absolutely could have made a mistake. Continued to make mistakes. But that being said, though, I'm sure the same design team is not the same design team that has made every single raid tier for the past few years. But hopefully they've learned from their mistakes, and hopefully what they've learned from Tomb of Soak Garrus to Antorus to here, they've continued to perfect and improve some of these raids. But yes. Cool.
So basically, what you did is you brought all your melee to Zool, only if there were a rogue, and then you set them for Mithrax, right?
Pretty much, and like that's super unfair. Like, okay, you bring your rogue alts for Zool, and now people have gear, so you don't really need all the rogues. But yeah, I mean, it sucks. It sucks, and if you ever want a range spot for sure, you like almost always run a mage or a warlock. Like those will pretty much always get you a raid spot. But what else? What else is on the calendar?
Well, Pilgrim's Bounty was this week, and it ends tomorrow. There was nothing new for 2018. For our Zeros to Heroes folks, if you haven't gotten your silver-plated turkey shooter, you probably should, because the foundation of Zeros to Heroes comes from a turkey and a hide-and-go-seek. So you have one more day to get it if you want to participate in the fun and events.
So if it ends November 26th, is that tonight at 3 a.m. does it end?
I didn't look. It just said on the 26th, and I'd have to look at my calendar. It might just be tonight. Also, if you get the experience buff, you also can get an experience buff from feasting. So if you add that with the WoW anniversary, you can really, maximize your, sort of like doing the Dark Moon Fair carousel ride with it. You can maximize your reputation and or XP gains. I know a lot of people have been busy leveling tunes last week.
Yeah, oh, for sure. I mean, a lot of the guildies alts have just been crazy leveling. There's I think 4 warlocks being leveled recently. I started leveling my warlock a little bit because it's 14% bonus from the anniversary, 10 more percent through what is it, war mode, and another 5% through the gem. And then I mean I've got arrested on top of that and doing islands, and you just breeze through the levels. I mean, if you've got a solid group to just churn through a bunch of islands, then do some questing afterwards, it's so easy. So this might be the time where I finally level my alt. I'm at 2 levels through so far, and then my patience runs out pretty quickly for leveling another alt. So we'll see. Hopefully soon.
I read on the forums, since I've been forced to read the forums regularly, that somebody has leveled like 6 tunes on the islands, and they hope to never see another island again.
Well, that's the advantage. Like, if you're leveling during islands, you might get some rares, some pets, mounts, maybe something, right? Like, because you're forced to do so many more.
Well, and it is a good experience game. I did a couple when I was finishing up my horde, but I enjoy the islands, so I'm not one to I don't want to break them either. So I do the 5 a week, and maybe I'm on another tune, but I don't do them just to do them.
Cool. So the Pilgrim's Bounty, I don't have the silver-plated turkey shooter because I was looking for it the other day. What do I do for this? So I've got another day to do this Pilgrim's Bounty thing. I don't often do these calendar events. How easy is it? Difficult? Do I need to just like shoot some turkeys, eat some turkey food?
Oh, well, you would ask that because I haven't gotten one, and I got it when it came out. So I didn't look. I don't remember. I can look it up real quick. But I don't remember how you got the turkey, the silver.
I remember reading something on Wowhead. Like, you need to turn in a feast. It's in a satchel or something, a 2% drop, and there's a rare pet of some sort. I don't know. Maybe the viewers can just tell us while we move on. Yeah, viewers, you guys got that. Perfect. So the other big thing that's coming up soon, very soon, is 8.1. WoW has got a nice release calendar of, Tides of Vengeance, content release calendar, what's happening. So do you want to talk about what's happening in 8.1 very soon? 2 weeks, right?
Well, I know it's starting in December 11th.
Yep.
And WoW had put in there it's susceptible to time gating, which I expect a lot of this content is going to be gated. And of course, then the raids and all of that stuff are coming in January. But they are going to do a continuation of the war campaign.
Yeah, those are pretty fun.
Yeah. And then the heritage armor for the blood elves and dwarves. Now, from what I understand, it's just a short quest line, and as long as you're involved, exalted, for example, for the dwarves with Iron Forge, I'm not sure what is it. Blood elves would be. What
Um,
city are they at?
you
But
know,
as long as you're exalted, you just get the quest, finish the quest line, and I believe you get the heritage armor.
so wait, can you? I thought you could level blood or dark iron dwarves now.
You can Dark Iron Dwarfs is different. So Dark Iron Dwarfs, if you level them from
Oh,
20
this is
to
blood elves, not dark iron
120,
dwarves. Yeah, okay,
yes, okay. So if you level them from 20 to 120, you will get the heritage armor. But what
gotcha.
Blizzard has done is they've added heritage armor for existing classes. So this is for blood elves and dwarves. So we have to presume that humans are going to be coming, and gnomes and all of those things. And as long as you are exalted with your home city faction, you've basically already leveled this
Oh,
team.
perfect.
And so then you just do a quest line and get the heritage armor.
Gotcha. Okay, so I was confused with dwarves and dark iron dwarves. I had no idea that there was a heritage armor coming for these guys. I guess that's nice. Cool. They get your own armor 14 years later.
Hey, for us that like to do transmog, speaking of forums, I spent, going through all these posts of enjoying in the game what you enjoy.
Yeah,
Because not everybody likes raiding. Not everybody likes. So some
Azurite,
of us like
islands.
transmog. Yes. Some people are very happy with just going in and doing LFR.
For sure.
And that's great. It's a game. It's a hobby. It's something you do with a passion and you enjoy. I've had, like I said, and I've mentioned this the last 3 weeks. I've had more fun doing the Horde storyline, because I've had a lot of fun. They have some different quests. It's been fun. It's the first time I've ever gotten into the Horde and finished it to max level. And now I sort of want to go back and finish the storylines and get the reps from the Horde side. Um,
Wow,
so I may
they've really
be
got you,
spending.
huh? That
Yeah, they got
traitorous.
me. They got me for at least for a while.
That's good though. I mean, yeah. I mean, as long as you find something to do, and of course the Saurfang and Tyranny quest lines are there. It's something different to do, and not all bits of content appeal to everybody. And this is also a nice time because people are feeling a bit of burnout. There's other things to do, and sometimes it's pet battling, and as a raider, sometimes it's more world quests, or sometimes it's transmog stuff, and finding those little goals, or mount farming, and maybe it's if you're an alliance player, it's like Midges is doing, leveling on horde side and doing the quest there. So there's always something to do for players, and of course more things to do. Paragon reputation rewards. So those of you that remember the mounts and the emissary chests or whatever it was, well, they're bringing those back. But I mean, it's just pets this time.
Apparently, though, it's only, and I was excited, but the way it was worded was it's only companion pets are the rewards in
Ah,
the Paragon reputation. Because last time you remember it was mounts, so it's only pets.
well,
But there are 4 pets coming for out.
yeah. I mean, I was hoping. I don't know. Mounts are a bigger thing, I think, and there's. I don't know. People really like those mounts and collecting that number. Whereas pets, there's so many. So I would say, bring 8 pets instead of just 4. But that's just me. Uh, and of course, there's new islands expeditions coming out and new vendor, which you're able to buy some of the pets and mounts and things like that, right? Uh,
Actually, you're able to buy some really cool things. So,
yeah.
for those of you who didn't get the angler fishing wrap
What is
in
that?
Mist of Pandaria, oh, it's awesome. Especially if you have a character that doesn't have levitate. It's a fishing raft so that you can get to
Oh
fishing pools
yeah.
off. Yes, and so you can buy one of those, and there's other toys and pets. But the big item that I saw when I was looking at the vendor, and I said, "Oh, I have to have it," is the fishing raft, because it's a toy,
Mm-hmm.
and then it becomes usable on all of my tunes. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
currently only my gnome has the fishing raft, and she has levitate, so she doesn't really need it.
Gotcha. Yeah, this is actually a really good week to do island expeditions. For those of you that like to farm the crap out of them, the way to do it is, you take your 2 DPS and a tank or whatever. There's for 2 doubloons a lucky do or an unlucky do, whatever it is. You buy 3 of them. Essentially, you pull pretty much the entire island, and it is a 20-second disorient, and it doesn't break. And the great thing about this disorient is that you can chain it. So 3 players, 20 seconds each. Then that's full 60 seconds of a non-stop CC. These things don't break. It only doesn't work on the rare giants, or like the big boss guys, but it also has a 1 minute cooldown, so it'll come up on cooldown every single time. So you could essentially pull the entire island and just blow all your cooldowns, heroism, whatever, and AoE everything down. So That's one really good way of doing those things. If you have doubloons, use them, but also start saving them for the stuff that's coming up. Cool. Uh,
Exactly.
and incursions are coming up as well, and those are what, similar to the invasions that we had in the past.
They're similar to the invasions, and I'll be curious because they've also said they were making some leveling
Mm-hmm.
changes. So it may be a situation where instead of doing islands, you'll be doing incursions to level those tunes. Because I seem to recall there was quite a bit of reputation for
Yeah.
XP gain out of those
Mm-hmm.
too. And so that is coming. I don't know if they're bringing in heirloom armor yet. I don't believe that was mentioned, but you know, and I think it's probably a little early in the XPEC to start seeing heirlooms.
Yeah, probably by 8.2, 8.3, we'll see more of them. I mean, that being said, they are reducing the amount of XP needed for leveling drastically, right? So that's one big thing. What else? So account-wide reputation changes are coming, the reputation credit and transmogs and all that stuff. So you have it on your main, you're exalted, great. You'll be the same thing with all your other characters. Account-wide flight paths, I guess that's nice. I don't know. Does it really matter?
Well, it does. It doesn't matter to you because you don't level
Oh,
alts.
I.
But for my alt over here that hasn't done any of the opening up of, for example, Zuldazar,
Mm-hmm.
will be able to get those flight paths account wide. So once
Gotcha.
you've done them on one tune, you don't have to go and explore them on all the other tunes. It's similar to the toys that you have that you can buy from the heirloom armor vendor for the old world, so that they no matter what tune you create, you can have all the flight points or most of them.
Cool. So the one big thing that's coming is the new Darkshire Warfront, and I mean the world revamp there, which is great. There's a Warfront vendor, but I mean I like Warfronts. I like doing my weekly or bi-weekly Warfront. I'm looking forward to doing another one. I like that kind of stuff. Not everybody does, but I don't know. I like that kind of content, and it's weird, and I don't know. What about you? Are you a Warfront fan?
I enjoy it somewhat. I don't think I'm as into. I like going and getting the rares, and I've got almost everything. I've just got a couple of mounts and a couple of things to still kill.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's okay. It's sort of like a longish scenario. Um, I think I like the islands better than I do the war fronts, but they're okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
I'm looking forward to the heroic Warfronts whenever those come out. They're not slated on the schedule though, right? From what I've seen, they're going to be
no,
closer to
not yet.
8.1.5 or
Yeah.
8.2, which is a little disappointing. But I mean, you can only bring out so much content during Christmas, I guess.
Well, you got to give something to do while what for those the after Christmas dinner and whatnot. You
Mm-hmm.
know.
Exactly. I mean, most Warcraft players, we're not family people. We're not social people. Just leave us alone to our Warcraft. That's what we want to do.
Exactly.
So class changes. Anything major coming up for class changes? Some Shadow Priest
Well,
stuff.
the big one is the shadow priests and the shamans
Mm-hmm.
got some changes. And of course, if you go and look, there's play all over the place. Whether it's on the Warcraft site, the upcoming class changes are a big thing, and especially for those classes that had some challenges.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're going to be happier with them. I'm not sure if shamans are where they want to be yet, but uh, proof will be in the pudding. But those are all coming in. Of course, you can find them on World of Warcraft or Wowhead.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Um, so I think that's more class specific as to you paying attention to what you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're playing one of those specs, I mean, the shaman changes were, I think they were more promised some major mechanical and gameplay changes, and what they got was mostly numbers changes for the most part. At least that's what I've heard and what I've seen from the enhancement shaman perspective. I haven't followed Elemental or Resto too much. From what I've heard, Elemental's in a pretty solid place right now. At least, our Zeus Elemental Natoro is, and he's pretty happy. So, as long as he's happy, that's what matters.
Well, he was happy. He may not have liked things, but he still could make that shaman sing.
Oh yeah, for sure. Cool. I mean, and of course, there's Champions of Azeroth, which we talked about, and reputation changes. But I mean, Warcraft is a game that is, as many of you guys would say, full of mistakes, right? And that's what our podcast is about. And when we're talking about mistakes, it's mistakes you can call, and this is a good quote from Richard Bach. They're unexpected learning experiences, right? And oftentimes they're intentional learning experiences. So we're talking about mistakes in general, and it's a very vague, you know, podcast topic of, I mean, listen, everybody makes mistakes, and I wrote a good podcast or a good blog post a while ago titled "You Are Failures. You're all failures," and if you're a listener right now or a viewer, you're all a bunch of failures, and of course we all are, because we all fail and we all make mistakes, and what matters is failing and failing forward, learning from those mistakes. So oftentimes in a raid, you're in a raid setting, or you're in an LFR, or you're in a dungeon, or you just wiped the raid and you've made a mistake. But you're human, right? At the end of the day, you're human, and oftentimes we're in a raid setting, and you want to play as perfectly as you can, and there's always somewhere to improve. We're constantly making those mistakes. No one's ever really truly playing perfectly, because oftentimes when we do our log evaluations, as death jesters in the guild, okay, so you've got number one percentile or whatever, 100 percentile in the world for damage or healing. Awesome, that's great. So how could you improve from here? Because guaranteed there is something you can do to improve, and that's not necessarily a mistake, but there's always room for improvement. Oftentimes
I don't know. I made a really good mistake yesterday.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's actually kind of a. This is what happens when you raid with Midge.
Okay,
So
let's hear it.
They were working on Mother, Mythic Mother, and of course I had stepped out from Talic to Mother, so that some other people could get in.
Mm-hmm.
And I came in and we'd wiped on Mother a couple of times, and we decided to take a break. Well, we were coming back in, and I see this little dwarf there, and I look at him, and then as I mouse over him, I see a little cogwheel. And I missed the part where they had the mages, use their frostbolt or whatever to open the door, and I pulled all the trash and killed everybody while they were on break.
Wait, oh, the trash. This is dwarf. Nice dwarf, guys. What does he do? Well, he wipes it and he pulls the trash.
In Uldor, they say don't push the red button. There was no sign that said don't click this.
That's what we need. We need a red button in all these zones. That's the thing, though. Like, okay, so you've wiped the raid, and now what, right? Like, well, is it going to ruin your day? Is it the end of the world that Midgets has wiped the raid? I mean, really, it's more of a hilarious story, right? I mean, like, we're raiding and we're playing in games that are not too high pressure situations, right? It's not as if we're on a super time crunch and every second counts. Like, okay, I mean, that's a little hilarious, right? I mean, it's a good story. So, I mean, how are you feeling after that one?
Okay, well, I think they should put signs. So here's my logic. In King's Rest, when I click on those little things, I found Peppy. I was looking for Peppy. I thought maybe there was a Peppy there.
What?
So
what things in King's Rest?
Well, there's little doors in King's. You don't know this? There are little doors in King's Rest.
Of course, you would find the doors.
If you click on them, there's a Peppy in there.
Oh, the bird, right? Like the orange bird, Pepe?
Yes.
Ah, I see.
Okay, so I was looking for more Peppies. Apparently, though, poor Perdition came back and was sort of like, what happened? Because he was dead the whole time.
Yeah, well, I mean, so nobody saw it, right?
Me. In this case, it was funny. So we took it with the humor that it was. Now, if I had done that in the middle of progression and we'd been wiping, it probably wouldn't have been funny. But it was still a mistake.
Yeah.
And maybe it was a mistake to bring Midge, because she will click on buttons.
Okay, so we're talking about this, but okay, we've got a mistake like this one. You hit a button or you hit a cogwheel. All right, so as a player, as a person, what do you do to improve? Like, how do you we make mistakes and we say, oh yeah, sorry, I'm trying to make sure it doesn't happen again. So how do you go back to that and say, okay, I'll try that doesn't happen again?
Well, I'll probably do it on purpose next time. But if you were going to talk, I'm going to plan that one better. But it was more, again, that one's probably not the best example of a mistake, and one that you want to improve for, because it was just comic relief.
For sure.
And it wasn't intended to be, but at that point it became that. Better things, though, and something that we deal with within the Mother encounter is somehow we have gotten an entire raid that don't like to talk at all.
On Mother.
At all. On Mother.
Oh, man.
And so the dispel mechanic is a little challenging. when you have 1 out of 15 raiders that'll say, "Hey, dispel me, please."
Mm-hmm.
It's a tough audience. I try talking to them because you don't get any responses, and it's comical. But how do you improve that? So we can sit there and we can say repeatedly, "Hey, you guys have got to call dispels. We're wiping the raid." And what has happened though is we've made more use of being more visual when they've stepped out,
Mm-hmm.
because they're going to have to either get comfortable with us, or one of them has he managed to. He's been playing the game Terradeem for like 10 years without his mic. He has a new headset, but
Mm-hmm.
it's still in the box next to his computer. He hasn't plugged it in yet. So there are some challenges there. So how do you improve on something like that? You've got a raid team, and we're doing pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
We're killing the bosses. We've adapted to the situation. Ideally, we would love everybody to say, "Hey, dispel Amy," or "dispel Midge," or whatever. But that's not happening. So we've had to come up with other solutions. How do you improve from those? And then more seriously, if you let's just use the mother encounter because it has some obvious, mechanic challenges, like you want to make sure that you're in the proper places for the beams that come down and things like that. And you make a mistake there and you wipe the raid. Or you've got the plague and you didn't say dispel me and you wipe the raid.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you start making those improvements and make stakes?
So I look at it as part of it is yes, you need to look at stress and communication, and the lack of communication certainly is a mistake that it needs to improve upon. But what if you had a mute player? Someone, I mean, I've had players like this in the raid teams over the years where they actually cannot speak. They absolutely cannot speak on their mic for whatever reason. And so we've made accommodations to accommodate these players, whether it be whispers or, I mean, in this specific instance, there are weak auras that'll say it is clear to dispel this person. Alternatively, we have Severus boss mods in our raid. Severus, our raid lead, who announces everything, and it's super awesome because it is every single ability listed. This one's coming. Do do this next, and it's fantastic because it's telling us exactly what to do. But with players that that can communicate but aren't, I mean, part of it is just continue stressing it. Otherwise, if it's not happening, okay, well, how can we accommodate? How can we change what we're doing, change our strat to make sure it works? Because right now, people are not communicating, so they're not going to learn it over the next couple of attempts. Right? We can give them weak auras that say, "Hey, the virus is on you. Say something now." Right? We can have little pop-ups, whatever. But ultimately, it may come down to having a raid lead, have the person run out, and then as healers, if you visually see that they are far enough, or the weak aura says they are far enough to dispel, that's when you would dispel. Right? So that's how I would deal with it. I mean, there's three different ways. But yeah, I mean, and how do you guys deal with it? You guys just had the healers, visually look.
We were doing the visually look and watching the
Yeah.
chat bubbles. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, and those help. And those chat bubbles say, "Okay, safe to dispel now." And I mean, the way we've gone over the years is fantastic, right? And part of that is, yeah, there was a mistake along the board. Somebody made a mistake and totally wiped the raid, and it still happens because somebody doesn't get out with the debuff or somebody dispels it too early. And we need to improve from those, right? So we've continued to develop our tools to improve that performance. And between tools we have weak auras and raid leads and people, and we have WoW Analyzer, which is fantastic. But oftentimes, you look at getting feedback, right? And so mistakes and feedback sort of go hand in hand. Um, when you have feedback given, or when a raid leader gives you feedback, it's take it in the spirit that it's given, right? Imagine you're a parent or you're a kid in the back of the car, and you're screwed out in the back, and the parents say, "I'm going to turn this car right around." Well, are they really going to turn the car around, or are they just saying that? Are they frustrated, right? Because you're being a little shit. So oftentimes, depending on the tone of the raid, you need to take a look at, are they being serious? Is it in a positive atmosphere? What is the nature of the feedback given? And sometimes it's, listen, guys, get your shit together. Let's go kill this boss. You're much better players. That's more motivational, whereas the negative feedback is more, you guys suck, you're retarded, how do you even play this game? Like that's more toxic feedback, and that really has no place in raiding. I mean, maybe in some of the other guilds with, those basement dwellers out there, but really it has no place in a, proper raid setting. So that kind of feedback is more of an issue, and the other flip side of the negative feedback, that is it's very vague. So you guys need to do more damage. Okay, so damage on what? Who is you guys? Right. So oftentimes I find that kind of feedback is really ineffective, where you guys need to do more healing, or more damage, or take less damage. Well, what do you mean? Like, what specifically do you mean? Are the rogues not doing enough AoE damage? Right? Are the warlocks not dotting enough? Right? Are they not using their seeds appropriately? You have to be more specific. And oftentimes, as raid leads, we need to get into the nitty gritty of it and what's happening, right? Because listen, I think I'm doing things correctly, but I'm a DPS, and you're saying do more DPS. I'm like, well, I don't know. Should I be potting earlier? Like, it sort of creates this big gap of communication because the directions are unclear, and stuff stuck in Blender. So, well, what do you do? So you ask for more
Well,
specific.
well, yeah, and I mean, you can say the same thing for like on the healer perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you need to up your numbers. Up my numbers how?
Well, how? Like, give me better cooldowns. Give me innervate, wisdom. Like, give me a better place to use my revival or tranquility, or like, can I stand in shit on purpose to up my numbers? Like, what are you saying here, right? Like, so when you get feedback, that feedback should be specific, and that goes into our other section of, as leaders, we need to give that specific feedback as well, of what exactly do we want, right? Don't suck. Okay, right? Like, fine, we're sucking as a team. How am I sucking? Like, yes, I'm dying to stuff. Do you have suggestions? So if I'm getting that feedback, okay, cool. You're right. I'm not performing well, right? Okay, I'm not doing well. Do you have any tools or any suggestions of what I can do better, right? And that's the kind of feedback you should be, bouncing off of your raid lead. Just be specific. Like, they're not saying I suck because they hate me, or I'm a terrible paladin. I'm playing poorly. Okay, so the raid leads being the experts, or the officers, whoever it is, being the experts. What tools, what suggestions do they have for you, right? And it often comes down to, ABCs always be casting, or your UI issues, or tracking, or practice, or whatever it is, right? And Amy's got
Okay.
an example here of stop dying to stupid shit. Okay, well, yeah, I know I'm dying, standing in stupid stuff, whether it's the blood puddles in Talic or whatever, or the Zekvaz, big raging stuff. I'm dying to stupid shit. Okay, so how do I adjust my play to correct that mistake? Go ahead.
Well, and a lot of times what we do is we ask other more experienced players. I know that we did with some of our newer players on our team. We asked them to give us. I went to some of our more experienced players and asked them to take a look at the logs, and they gave some real tips.
Yeah.
And what was really interesting, and this was a recent thing too, and and maybe we can sort of cover that. So they're making, according to the numbers or what we're seeing, they're not competing with the rest of players of a similar class.
Mm-hmm.
And so we give them a log review, and we had one come back and give a very very lengthy response of why they were doing the things that they did, and I found that incredible from the player to want to put that kind of time to come back and do that opinion, that take that time and respond to it. And then I have to ask a couple of things, within the play styles. So let's just say he came back or she came back and said all of these things, and half of them were wrong. Are they wrong, or are we looking at it wrong? And so there's a couple of things within this mistakes of looking at things and dealing with people that I'm going to question, because I know I get the benefit sometimes of seeing a lot of interesting and really in-depth conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And they came back and said, "You're not doing this mechanic or this spell at this mechanic at this time." And the response was, "Well, why not? Because all of the druids do it." And then the person came back and said, or hunter, or shaman, or whatever. The other person came back and said, "Well, these are the reasons why." So then we have to go to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something that is right in their responses? And if not, are they just defending themselves? Or is there a different play style that we haven't considered? And so maybe we can sort of touch on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll give a couple of really good examples of exactly that. Oftentimes, we get Holy Paladins applying, and I go through their log. I'm like, oh, fantastic. You're running Mercy. Tell me why you are running an inferior aura in a mythic encounter. And oftentimes, the answer is my raid leaders are idiots. I have to listen to them, and I've tried to give them feedback, and they want me to run Mercy. Okay, that sort of makes sense. So you're not a dumbass, and you're running what your raid lead, who is in an ill-informed, doing that. And other times it'll be because it doesn't really matter that much. Like it's just Talic, it's a farm encounter, right? Well, that's not the right attitude we want to have. Another great example is auras on Mother. Hey, why are you running Aura of Sack? Like, that seems like such a weird aura to run, because Devotion's going to give you 20% reduction. Mercy's going to heal that pitiful amount, and I guess it's fine. And so, well, the good answer is, well, I can bubble with my sack, and it actually gives me a 30% raid-wide reduction over Devotion's 20%. And so you have to look at why people are doing certain things, right? You have to ask those questions rather than just say, oh, well, this numbers aren't right, and this guy needs to get 2 more tranks in here, and that's why. So you're right. Absolutely, asking those questions, can give you those better answers.
Well, and it's interesting too, because the one thing that, and a lot of the responses were, well, this was going on, and this is what happened, and
Mm-hmm.
this is why I did this. And so maybe it wasn't textbook rating. And in their view, it wasn't a mistake. And they felt like the review itself might have been a mistake. So, how do you take that as the player? And so let's say you bring this back and they say, well, no, this is what you're supposed to be doing at this time period. And this is the rotation and you don't understand it or whatever. And as a player, you're going, but this was going on, this was going on, this was going on. Yes, I would love to be casting Prayer of Mending on cooldown, but I was busy running away from the DPS that decided to come sit next to me or whatever.
Yeah, and I think going into let's say I'm a raider and Midget is my raid lead, and she says, well, you're doing this incorrectly, and I come back and say, well, I had to do these because this was happening. Here is the evidence. Like, don't just take my word for it. Let me show you, right? Little Scandre over here was running on top of me, and I had to run away from her because because of this ability was coming, and we were going to throw a double orb on something, right? So I had to do this, and I wasn't able to get those casts off because of this situation. And then hopefully, your raid lead Midgets has that understanding. Oh yeah, okay, this makes sense now, right? Let's go back to the other side, and okay, let's focus on positioning of the raid in general, right? So we're not making those mistakes again, because it's affecting one player and hitting that domino, right? And the dominoes start falling, and the raid's going to wipe.
Well, and I read something interesting in the minutia of the Warcraft forums while I'm getting trust levels, um, of where this guy said, I spent all of this time um, working with this warrior, and we were standing in front of a dummy, and we were working on his rotation, and I was showing him the optimal things to do, and then I take him back into raid, and it's like he never heard those things. How do you
Interesting
deal with that? You
that
know?
you've given them feedback, and suddenly they've forgotten all that feedback.
Yeah, he just went in and he could do it in front of a test dummy, but doing it live is quite a bit different, which I remember those days. Um, it is different because you don't have mechanics. You're just standing in front of a test dummy.
For
And
sure.
so then you probably revert back to home. So and maybe this is more of a leadership topic of where do you find that line of grooming the players and showing them their mistakes, or even if they come back and they say, well, this is this and this, showing them and taking the time to show them that that answer is probably not the best answer.
Yeah, and when we're giving this kind of feedback and somebody says, okay, well, this was going on. Okay, cool. That's great that you handled it this way. In the future, I'd like you to handle it this way because of this reason. A great example was Mythic Gahoon. We are soaking the stupid little blood, orb, whatever, blood boils, whatever they are, And depending on where these things set spawned, if you attack, like if you approach them at a certain angle because of the way the mechanic works, basically it's the closest person get hit by this blood boil thing, and if the person gets hit by two, they get mind controlled. So if you're standing between two of them, there's a chance, for instance, that you're going to get hit by both. So by standing on the opposite side, I guess. If there's one on the left side and one on the right side, if you stand on the left side of the left one and the right side of the right one, you're really far away from the opposite one. And that's, a bit of a teaching moment for players, right? So that's great that you tried to handle it this way. Here is a better way to handle it. And I guess that brings us to, the leadership topic of, well, you know what? Raid leaders don't always know everything, right? We often have to rely on players that know better. And for instance, Amy has got a good example here, where Amy's standing as a Windwalker, standing in front of the boss on Mother, and Raid, you shouldn't be in front of the boss because of the frontal attack. Well, as I have Touch of Karma, or like I should be standing here to maximize my damage. Oh, cool. Okay, thanks for correcting me. Right, like we as raid leads, yeah, you want to be right, but at the same time, we're always learning, right? That's a mistake. Like we're always making those mistakes and learning and improving ourselves and improving your own knowledge, right? Not every raid leader is going to know every single thing out there. We have to rely on our team to give that feedback appropriately. And as leaders, right, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Right? It's okay to make those mistakes. And while there is a lot more pressure on the raid leads and officers in gym, the worst thing you can do is inaction. So not do anything, right? If there's an issue, give feedback immediately and appropriately. And if you make mistakes, which you will, own them. Like, oh, you know what, Amy, you're absolutely right. Sorry about that. Carry on. Cool. We've moved on, right? I've learned something about Windwalkers, and Amy has learned something about how to communicate really well to the raid leads, and the rest of the team has heard that conversation and says, oh, okay, cool. So if I have an issue and I think it's incorrect, I'm okay going to the raid leader and trying to correct them. Absolutely. That is the kind of relationship you should have with your raid leads, right? And moving on to raid performance. So when we give that, those bits of feedback, it's appropriately toned feedback for the situation, right? If somebody, I don't know, missteps by 2 yards, or they're not stacking, you got a mechanic where you're supposed to be stacking really well, like super, super tight, and often say, Spartyism, Sparty says, tight like boy's anus, not loose like sleeve of wizard. And everybody stacks in super tight. Like you should be so stacked in that you are up the boomkin's butt and you can't see your character. That is a stacked position. And if somebody's 2 yards off because they're casting, what is appropriate feedback? Okay, shift in further, make sure you're really close, make it fun, whatever. Is it appropriate to ream this person out because they were 2 yards out trying to finish a couple of casts? Probably not appropriate, right? And again, it goes back down to that specific feedback rather than vague feedback, right? I mean, and there's value in both. Good example, again, here, Amy in chat says, for instance, Zekvaz. Zekvaz has the big darkness abilities, and you could either say, hey, stop dying to stupid shit, or stop dying to the raging darkness. Don't stand in there to finish your casts. And that's more of a mentality thing of, okay, I should not play greedy to get one extra cast off, because that half a second that I'm going to lose is half a second of movement. And if I can't afford half a second of movement, I'm going to die. And dead DPS does no DPS. And then that's a really big mentality shift for players to understand. So that's really important. And that's where the teaching is, right? Like that is good specific feedback of what you want from your players. And, if there's vague feedback, DPS, I want you guys to really push the numbers on the Zekvaz warriors. This is where you should be saving cooldowns. This is the deadliest part of the entire encounter. This is where we need your damage. As players, you know how to hit your cooldowns, save them for the warriors, for instance. And so there's definitely examples of both. And moving on to the next, like oftentimes people will make mistakes, right? And when you're correcting people, right, as raid leads, as officers, you often want to use teaching moments. And so sometimes there's valuable feedback in, okay, I'm just going to whisper this person and tell them, hey, you need to stand over here next time or do this better. Cool. Next person does the exact same thing. Hey, we're going to whisper them to save their feelings, whatever, and try to do this better. And you go down the line and you've done this about 10 times that night. But you know what? Using teaching moments, giving, collective feedback of, Amy, you should not be standing in this because of this reason. Well, that's feedback to everybody else as well, right? That's feedback for everybody that they should be learning from each other. It's not, okay, Sparty's made a mistake, awesome. That's one checkbox. And now, Ding Pong in channel in here, he makes the same mistake. Cool. He gets to make the same mistake. And so all 20 people have now made the same mistake because we didn't correct it, right? We should be learning from each other's mistakes and not just from, okay, my own, right? And that's how you minimize those attempts, minimize those wipes. And, fundamentally, right, I always say there's 2 important rules to raiding. There's just 2 simple ones. Number 1, stand in the right spot. Number 2, kill the ads. If you do those 2 things correctly, any boss will die, because the goal is to turn every boss, like you said earlier, into a training dummy. Everyone knows how to deal with training dummies. You just stand there, you do your DPS rotation, like the back of your hand. But by, focusing on those 2 fundamental rules of raiding, you down every boss. It applies to every single boss out there. Stand in the right spot, kill ads. That's it. So, using those teaching moments, using collective feedback, that is important.
Absolutely. Well, but what happens? So, and it happens. So you'll have somebody who's in the raid, and they've been in for the raid for a while, and they don't necessarily do all of the things right, or healing's more of a struggle, or their DPS is really low, and they've been in the raid for a while. And you've got 2 situations. You've got a player that's not performing into the standards of the team. And then you've got the second situation of the raid team's growing frustrations. What do you do with that?
It depends. This is a very common issue that guilds will experience of, I've got a couple players that are just not on the same curve as everybody else. They're a bit of a slower, like they're awesome people in the guild. They do plenty of theory crafting. They can play really well. It just takes them more attempts to learn these bosses. And so you have to go back to Sparty's big question, right? What is best for the guild? What is best for the team? Is it sitting and replacing this person, or is it reminding the team that they are a team and they win and lose together, right? It depends. Sometimes you may have to swap people out, right? Because they're not getting it in time. If it's going to take your raid team in general 25 pulls to learn this boss, awesome. If it's going to take this person 75 pulls, that might be a bit of an issue because they're just not learning as quickly as they should. And, maybe you want to give them some better tools and some better practice, so they're not really impeding the raid and slowing things down for your raid team. Again, it depends. Depends on what's important for your raid team. But ultimately, the question is, what is best for your team and what is best for your guild? Sometimes it's sitting, sometimes it's not.
So let's just say you decided not, and you kept them in for the 75 wipes, and the team frustration grew through then. What do you do with that?
Mistakes were made. Like sometimes you own it, right? Like, listen, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't have done that. Maybe I should have swapped them out, right? And it is okay to make those mistakes. There's a lot of pressure and there's some regret sometimes, but you know what? If you make a mistake and you brought in somebody for 75 pulls, and you know what? We've all done it. DJs have done it. My new raid leads have done it. They've kept people in the raid longer than they should have because they were just not learning. They didn't do their research, whatever. That's fine. It happens, right? So what do you do for next time? Okay, I know for next time, this person's learning curve is a little bit slower. That's okay, right? Totally fine. Am I going to bring them in for this next progression boss? Probably not. And that's okay until they really show that they have their stuff, that they've, learned quicker, or that they are capable of learning a bit quicker with the rest of the team. And that's what it unfortunately comes down to, right? Is it going to keep the majority of your players happy doing this thing? And if you make a mistake, you make a mistake. It's no big deal, right? It's a learning. And learning is totally fine to do.
Well, the only thing I would add to that is, as leaders, we need to recognize that sometimes our inaction make a situation worse. So in the case of what's best for the team or what's best for the guild, maybe keeping that one player in too long built the frustration, and it's not fair to the player either. And you have to remember that some people don't necessarily know they're doing things incorrectly. And if we haven't said anything to them, whose fault is it?
Exactly. It comes down to, like, this is what I've always said. It is raid leadership fault. If your team is sucking, you are the reason why it is sucking. Because number one, you didn't replace them, you didn't retrain them, you didn't have them improve. Like, it is you're the reason why they're wiping. As a raid lead, if I don't know who, Amy here in channel keeps wiping the raid and I don't sit her, whose fault is that? I mean, Amy may or may not know she's sucking. I know the rest of the team knows she's sucking, but she doesn't. So whose fault is it? Well, clearly the raid leader's fault for not swapping her out. And that is a mistake you make, you own up to, and you need to improve upon, right? But you need to ultimately communicate to Amy, hey, you're not doing well. And maybe Amy realizes that she's not doing well here and needs to be swapped out. It's like playing on a sports team, right? You have your off nights sometimes, right? You've got your Tiger Woods sometimes, and you play poorly. You haven't won a Masters in ages because of all the real life drama that's going on. And that's okay, right? Sometimes I can't make a Toronto Maple Leafs joke. They're actually doing really well. I don't know. Some bottom LA Kings team. I'm pretty sure they're doing poorly. Or the Vancouver Canucks. So sometimes you play like those guys, and sometimes you play like a Stanley Cup champion team. So, again.
Well, and it's not just in raid where you have things that happen as a leadership that maybe should have been handled differently, or, and this is a situation as a leader where I didn't say anything, and I should have. And it was a team that I was on, and they decided to do a quick LFR, and there wasn't quite enough to fill the LFR. So we had a few people that came with us. And during that LFR, because they're mythic raiders, we were 1 and 2 healing things, and these poor little LFR raiders that had joined us were dying, and we pulled the boss before they all got back, and there were so many things that we did that just represented the tag horribly. And I did finally say something. I said, what about the people that came with us? Well, we were just having fun. Well, if it was a group of 25 of us or 20 of us and we were just having fun, that would be great. But there were these 5 other people that were either dead or not there for the boss kill while we were horsing around. So what do you do with something like that? In my situation, I should have spoke up, and I didn't.
So from Midge's perspective, that is a learning opportunity, right? Like, she made a mistake. She probably should have said something earlier. She said something later on. Great. Like, that's a good way to turn it around. And sometimes you have, people having fun and not realizing what they're doing, right? People don't know they're being idiots until you tell them they're being idiots, right? Like, you guys are being idiots. Think of the other people. Think of how they are feeling right now, right? Poor little guys, like, they must be doing their first LFR ever, but maybe they just picked up the game, and this asshole Zeros to Heroes guild is just pulling bosses. I don't even see bosses. Random loot is dropping. Don't know what's going on. How does that reflect on everybody else? And people, like, it's okay. Like, people don't realize what they're doing sometimes. When I was young, I would do stupid shit too as, a young lifeguard, college kid, whatever. And you don't realize what you're doing and how it's affecting people or who it's going to affect. And again, it's a good reminder, like Midget said there, that's how you teach people, right? Like, you are, some people hate this, but oftentimes in these leadership positions, we are teaching people how to adult, right? Like, how to be decent human beings. That's what it comes down to, right? But people don't know, right? As they're stuck in their little Fortnite game, but people don't know how to adult. So oftentimes it's a reminder, hey, this is why we can't do this, right? Like, think of how, it affects the team or the guild. And sometimes you need to set those expectations, remind people, set boundaries, right? These are the rules, right? Whatever guild you are in is totally fine. If your guild doesn't give a shit what you do, that's okay. But here in these teams, right, it's important how we treat other people with respect. That excellence should be maintained, right? We want to treat people with respect and be excellent to each other, right? Like, that's the foundations of Zeros to Heroes and Death Jesters. So people make mistakes. Like, okay, so these 23 people, let's call it 23 people, made this mistake, right? Like, they represented the guild maybe poorly. Well, do we kick them out of the guild? No. Like, people make mistakes. They're human. Let's use it as a teaching opportunity and move on, right? And that is totally fine. It is absolutely okay. Now,
and from that, you can set boundaries and rules and expectations, because about most of the guild rules or expectations have come from a previous mistake.
Yes,
and as
go
leaders it's up to us. I mean, well, the foundation of most of the things that we say you shouldn't do is because somebody actually did them. There's a reason there is a label on a curling iron that says it will burn your eye, because somebody actually burned their eye. So we make mistakes and we learn from them. And
Yeah.
as leaders or people who produce products or anything like that, we now put out labels that say, please don't do that.
Yeah,
And that's
absolutely.
our job as leaders to make sure that those expectations are put in force. Covering, so for example, anybody that streams for our community, we ask that they cover guild chat. That came because somebody didn't, and somebody saw something personal that would only happen within guild.
Mm-hmm.
Or the rule of ask before you stream mumble. That came because somebody didn't want their voice streamed. And those so many of the things that we put into place aren't because we just want to come up with, we sit around and think of all the reasons we to tell people what to do. It's to prevent bad things from happening, somebody's
Yes.
feelings being hurt or whatever. So we learned from the mistakes, so those rules came from them. But as leaders, we have to actually be talking to the people and understanding what's happening. And when we're dealing with situations, talk to as many parties as involved and make sure that we get everything so that we are making good decisions to help prevent future mistakes. Because for every situation, there's five sides, or there's 10 or 20 sides. Whoever was involved, you could take that same LFR that I thought was horrific, and they would go, we were just having fun. Why are you being such a, old lady or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
We have
Yeah.
to learn from those.
You're absolutely right, and as leaders, we make mistakes too, and it is okay to admit your mistakes, right? People, and this is something that I've learned, they'll respect you admitting that you make a mistake over, oh yeah, it is totally your fault, or we're just going to ignore that, right? Like it's a mistake that I've learned over the years of like, listen, you make a mistake, you own up to it, and you move on, right? Plenty of people are going to realize that, hey, Sparty made a mistake there, and it's best to admit your own fault, like don't let your pride get in the way of, no, it wasn't me, it was the other guy. And that sort of comes back to like, how do you respond to some of the feedback and mistakes that you make? So if the raid leader calls you out for dying a stupid shit and they tell you to do this, do this, do this, and you're like, no, screw you, I know better. Okay. Or if you make excuses of like, well, this was going on, and this was going on, and this was going on, that's a different thing. And the same thing comes back to if let's say Darnath or Merkai or somebody here in channel is giving me feedback, and I say, well, no, I'm the guild leader, it is my way, right? It is what I want, and that's what it's important. you know that's being prideful and a little egotistical, and you don't want that, right? You want to accept the feedback and always be humble, when you're taking feedback from players, right? So make these mistakes, it is totally fine. Another really good one, that I'll share is I had a raider for years, great person, fantastic raid player. They're a little bit slower on the learning curve, and eventually they were no longer on our team for whatever reason, and they joined a different team. And the other team had similar issues to what we did, with this player, and they had a conversation with this player and said, "Hey," this was actually with my suggestion, because they asked me what to do with this player, and I'm like, well, you should just have a conversation with them and let them know that they're not going to be in for progression because their learning curve is that much slower, and they're going to be in for farm but not for progression because they can't keep up. And so the player goes around and goes back and says, you know what? Thank you. Thanks for telling me that, because Sparty and Death Jesters, they didn't do that for me. And I'm like, oh fuck, that hit me right in the feels. Like, you know what? That was a huge missed opportunity. I should have done that. Or like, I gave the other raid lead this advice, and I should have taken my own advice ages ago when we phased this player out, and like that was the wrong way to go about it, right? And as we wrap up here, it's a lot of mistakes. It's a lot of learning. You're like, oh yeah, Sparty's been running guilds so well. Great job, thank you, whatever. But ultimately, experience. There's another quote: "Experience is making mistakes and learning from them." Yeah, and experience. This 14 years of Warcraft experience, 17 years of EQ and Warcraft experience, all that stuff. Experience is a nicer way of saying mistakes. I have 14 years of mistakes made. Right? That is a different way of turning it out. And ultimately, these mistakes that happen, they're going to happen, whether they're big and small, and sometimes there's drama, and sometimes they're raid related, and you make these mistakes, and that's okay. But ultimately, do not let these mistakes define you. Let them refine you, and you are going to fail, but always fail forward. Any final thoughts, midgets?
No, I think it's been a good conversation.
All right, guys. With that, go on and make your mistakes. You're all a bunch of failures. I'll see you guys next week for a podcast. Thank you for listening, watching. Have a good night. Be excellent to each other, and as always, live your life heroically. Have a fantastic night.